stuff up here. Oh, we didn't open the altar. Altar was never closed. In case you're wondering, it's never closed at any point. Get some laundry hung up. Got to hang that stuff in the wind, right? So it doesn't get the stink of those fabric softeners on it. So, what does God and church and all that have to do with our laundry? What does God care about our laundry, right? I mean, you might be surprised just how much God cares about our laundry. I mean, in fact, it's actually in the Bible that he cares about our laundry. He actually gives us instruction, specific instruction. Leviticus 13 talks about it. It talks about him caring about our dirty laundry specifically. And so I mean your soul, right? I'm talking about. No, like cloth. Like seriously, like your laundry. He talks about mildew on your laundry. See, if you go reading Leviticus, there's a pastor that I care a lot for who actually spent a whole year preaching from Leviticus. Anybody in here read Leviticus and thinking maybe you wouldn't make it that year to church? It has specific instruction about stuff like how to cook meat and whether or not to date your cousin and laundry and mildew, right? So it gives specific instruction, and some of the things that it talks about is it gives 4 basic steps. First, if you find that you have mildew, not it's detailed. It's do you have a green mildew or a red mildew or a black mildew, and how you deal with this stuff. But the first thing it talks about is taking that piece of cloth and getting it out and taking it to the priest and showing it to him. Get it out in the light and take it to the priest and show it to him and have him look at it. So remember that. Take it out, take it to the priest. Have him look at it. And the second thing it talks about is to clean it. Duh. But these people didn't know some basic stuff. So when we're talking about Leviticus, they're dealing with some basic stuff. How do you fix, don't eat pork, because you guys haven't learned how to cook pork yet, and it'll make you sick. Don't eat shellfish, because it'll make you sick. Most people get sick on shellfish today if it's not cooked properly, right? So he was giving them basic instruction. But it says to clean it. And then it says to remove it for 7 days. Remove it from the other stuff. And then if it doesn't go away, if the mildew doesn't go away or the mold doesn't go away off of the clothes, the instructions are to burn it. To burn that piece of cloth. There's a lot of that kind of thing in the Old Testament because what we're dealing with, again, so often we look at things like this and we go, well, how come we can eat pork now? Well, we're not living in the same time. We don't have the same set of things to deal with it. They didn't have OxyClean at this point. They had to clean it with the water that they had and the pieces they had. And you needed to recognize when something was going to come back and get you. You couldn't run off mildew at this point. It was going to come back and get you. And if it did, you needed to burn the cloth that was there. That's great, Pastor Todd. So we'll go get some OxyClean. That's helpful. As I read about Jesus this week, and my assignment this week was we started talking because we actually have an assignment. As we look at this, we're talking about Jesus as the light of the world. And as I started reading about Jesus, what I started recognizing was that there was this continuous theme where he's dealing with the things that we don't understand or how to deal with and that we need to get cleaned up. He's dealing with the dirt in our lives and how we have to deal with it here. Just like mildew in our clothes, when it starts, we've got to remove it, right? We've got to figure out how to deal with it. And the Bible tells us that the world is full of all of these bizarre different things that will attack us and that we're going to have to deal with the first man and the first woman deal with it right off the bat. The fact that for some reason humans have this tendency to go towards the dark or to go towards the gross things, the things that we're forbidden from doing. The very first man and woman had one rule, but yet for some reason they were drawn towards breaking that one rule. And we today, it tells us that we today live in that sin. We live in this broken place where these things come at us and we have to deal with it. John tells us this way. He says, there are those who rebel against the light, and the eye of the adulterer watches for the dusk. He thinks, no eye will see me, and he keeps his face concealed from all of them. Deep darkness is their mourning. They make friends with the terrors of the darkness. It's Job, in Job 24. When Adam and Eve decided that they wanted to try out going against what God had in mind, when they decided that they would rather be in the dark than in the light for that moment, the moment that they did it, they recognized what was wrong with that. And their reaction was to go and hide from God. When you and I sin, when you and I deal with that thing that we do the same thing. At the time, and he's not, I started to say at the time I wrote this down, he wasn't going to be in the room, and I thought he was going to be in the room. I thought I was going to be doomed. I'm talking about my grandson, Gabriel. And the fact that you can see in little ones the rough edge of what this looks like for us to hide our sin from the rest of the world and the way we behave in our sin, that thing that is our dirt, our darkness. See, we're older and we're cool, so we don't do this. But when they're little, when you watch your babies coming up, you will know when they start recognizing that they want to do something that you don't want them to do. They've got their own little game working now, and they've decided that what you have and what your plan is isn't the way that they want to play it. And they don't quite know how to deal with that. They've decided that they want to do it, but this just feels all wrong. So how am I going to deal with it? So Gabriel, my grandson, is 3.5. And you could see this start about the age of 2.5, 2. That he would start, when he would want to do something you didn't want him to do. He's funny, watch him. He looks up this way. And he keeps doing whatever it is. And then, give you an example. Here we were at Brittany's wedding, and we're here in the sanctuary, and people are trying to get him all corralled to do what they want him to do. And so Gabe didn't want to be in here with all of us boring grown-up people. This is his church. And if anybody who knows, there's this little redheaded streak that runs past you here in the church every now and then. That's Gabe. And I'm blessed to death that he's a lot of times going, Papa, Papa, Papa. And he just runs to the church because he knows all of you and he isn't scared of you a bit. So we're at the wedding and there's a whole bunch of strangers here and we want him to stay with us in the sanctuary. So Gabe starts heading for that door. And he and his dad and I are both saying, Gabe, hey, Gabe. Gabe. And then he got to the threshold of the door. He took off running. Like, okay, I made it to the threshold. They can't possibly catch me. I'm safe now. Right? How many of you know a little boy or a little girl who thinks that if they can't see you, you can't see them? They haven't quite figured that out yet. But they will do that thing the moment that you can't see them. In fact, they'll hide their head behind the couch and do the thing, You can't see me. Or they wait till you leave the room. As Bill Cosby said, if you've only got one child, then you have missed a complete feature of children having in the who did that isn't a question you ask. When you walk in the living room and the lamp is busted and you have one kid, who did that is not a question. Unless you have a husband, and it might have been him, but that's a different story. They start hiding what they're doing from you. We start this from a very early age. Grown-ups do the same thing. There are things that we think we need and we start hiding. I mean, how do you think the mildew feels about the light being taken up and out, right? We're not going to assign feelings to mildew, but I have to imagine that for it, sitting in the corner, it's in the dark, wet pile that it's sitting in, it's pretty happy to be there and to continue to grow. And if we can leave ourselves in the dark and not expose it to others, then we can just keep on rocking on that thing that we think we need to do. John 3:19 tells us, men who preferred darkness to light because their deeds were evil. Everybody who does wrong hates the light and keeps away from it, for they fear his deeds will be exposed. We talked a few weeks ago about this idea of, do you want to get well? The idea that maybe you don't want to get well. Maybe you find comfort in that thing that is wrong or that is hurting you. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that, but I am going to spend a little bit of time on the idea that for many of us, I think you know the moment that you start walking into sin. Romans 2 speaks about the fact that you really don't even have to know the law of God. He's speaking to a bunch of people who know that there is this thing called the law, the Hebrew law, the 10 Commandments, if you will. You really don't even have to know that to have the law. He says that the Gentiles who don't have the law become a law unto themselves when they do what the law says is right. Their conscience convicts them. They know what's right and what's wrong. I would argue with you that as you walk into the casino with your house payment, that as you're walking in, you're doing this. And God is saying, excuse me, hey, you can't do that. Hey man, that's funky, don't do that. That's a mess. Don't get into that. I would argue that when you're sitting there flipping through the TV channels, and we all do it, flipping through the TV channels, and you pretend like you're just going up where HBO is because you never know, might be Andy Griffith's special up there. Then while you're doing it, oh, I fell in sin. There was a big pile of sin and I didn't see it and I just fell in it. Oh, I'm so sorry. I would argue that you like to be in the dark in those moments. That we have that moment, whatever that is. You know, as we talked about the other day. For you, it might be, we hear Oreo cookies are as addictive as cocaine the other day. Finally, it's explained. You've been waiting on another pastor to do the Oreo cookie reference, Dan, right? There it is. We finally learned that it doesn't, your sin, your mileage may vary. That's really not my point. My point is, we want to hold on to our sin. It comforts us. It is something that we enjoy. And so like my little Gabriel, we want to look the other way and pretend that mom and dad aren't really talking to us and that we don't hear it. But I'm going to ask you to be honest with yourself at this moment. In the darkness, I know you hear the voice of God speaking to you. I know you do. So, I'm going to assume something today. Because we spoke about this concept the other day of, do you want to get well? I can't decide that for you. We already established that. I cannot decide for you that you want to get well. You have to decide that you want to get well. I can preach to you till the cows come home. Hell, fire, and brimstone will come and get you, I promise. Doesn't matter if that's not where you are. If you're not ready to get well, I can't help you get well. So if you are ready to get well, listen, today we will cut this mildew away. We will deal with it today if you will listen. There's a song called the Untitled Hymn. Great song. Don't know why he couldn't have taken another 15 minutes and made a title up for it. But in fact, he says again and again and again and again, come to Jesus. I think that might have been we could have given it that title, I think. But it has an awesome line in it, and it just says, weak and wounded sinner, lost and left to die, will raise your head, for love is passing by. Mayday, mayday, love is passing by. You cannot walk out of this room today. Well, one guy just walked out. And say, I didn't tell you, because I'm fixing to tell you right now. How are we going to deal with this? Remember the mildew? Remember the mildew? A lot of things in this world work the same way. Mildew and sin work the same way. Getting rid of your crud works the same way. Don't matter what crud it is. All right. What was step one? Man, I told you there was going to be a quiz. Expose it. Take it to the priest. Bring it to the light. Expose it. Step two. Clean it. Clean it. Step three, for 7 days. For 7 days, separate it. And then finally, if it won't change, burn it. Expose it. Well, that seems to be the simple one, right? I would argue with you that that's the hardest one and the one that takes the most to get done. But if you can get that one done, it's awesome. Unless you got to do step 4. Remember we talked about a few weeks ago, the problem with this, as we just talked about, is that we love our sin. You didn't get your sin, whatever your sin, and I say your sin, okay, because, hey, everybody's got something that happened, things that happen through their life. You know, you're in a stairwell, and you can tell it's because I'm being so specific. I'm talking about somebody I know real well in my jacket. And you're nailing stuff like at the top of a ladder, and you've got a weird spot to get to, and you're just swinging for the world to get to that nail, and you just hammer that thumb. And you go, 4-letter word that begins with F and isn't real nice. And you're in this stairwell. Now, this has been a few years ago. Not to say that it wouldn't happen again today, given the right circumstances, because what is in your heart is what comes out. And you go, Lord, I'm so sorry. I'm trying to wash that out of me. I'm trying to get rid of that. I am so sorry that happened. Okay. So those moments are going to happen, all right? But that's not what I'm talking about, and you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about your sin. You know what your sin is. You know what your sin is. I know what my sin is. I know where I go when I get broke, all right? And I'm trying to get it worked through with the Lord, and I believe we got a good handle on it. But you know what yours is. When you reach that and you decide that you want to get rid of it, what's the first thing you've got to do based on what we just heard? Bring it forward to God. Expose it. Bring it to the priest. Okay? That decision controls everything in regards to removal of the darkness. I'm telling you, every sin I can think of, from overeating to frequenting brothels to mass murder all depend on you keeping it in the darkness. Every single one of them depend on you keeping it in the darkness. And Satan is loving it. But when you start walking towards God, when you start going to expose this to the priest, and we have been given a high priest, the Bible tells us, and his name is Jesus Christ. When you start exposing it, his plan starts falling apart, and things are going to get really weird for you. Let's go to John 1. If we have a private moment and you don't know Jesus Christ in your life, and we're going to start talking about who Jesus is and why you need Jesus and what it's all about, this is where I'm taking you. So if you want to know when you bring your laundry to me where we're going to go, this is where we're going to go. It says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word, and the God, and yes. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and He was with God in the beginning. Through Him all things were made, and without Him nothing was made that has been made. And in Him was life, and that life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not understood it. There came a man who was sent from God, and his name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning the light, so that through him all men might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only to witness to the light, the true light that gives light to every man was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision, nor of a husband's will, but born of God. If you can bring what you have to this priest and depend on him, then he will get you up out of that and change who you are. He will make you a child of God. Yeah, big deal, whoopee. I'm a child of God. Is that any different than it was yesterday? Here's the thing. If you can become a child of God, then your priority system suddenly becomes different. I'm not a piece of junk because he doesn't love me anymore and he left me for her. I'm not a piece of junk because I don't have enough money. I'm not a piece of junk because those guys call me names or push me around or make fun of me. I'm a child of God. I am a child of God. And no matter how awful or weird or yucky this gets to be, I have some place to go, that I belong. This is not my home. And I'm here working for him. Okay? You see, if we expose it to God, if we bring this to Jesus Christ, he'll do the cleaning. If you can get to the exposing part, he'll do the cleaning part. Because frankly, you've already shown you can't clean it. You can't fix it all. Part of this is also to recognize something else. You're sitting in a room full of priests. When you come up here to pray, or when you sit there and pray and raise your hand or look at your neighbor and say, I need some help. Help me. When you do, the Christians in this room are to be priests. Peter tells us this way. He says, We are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness and into his wonderful light. We can be that light. We can be that light. But part of being the light means you got to get rid of the darkness for yourself. You've got to stop looking at other people and saying, well, he's the wrong color. Or he's a yucky drinker person. Or he has AIDS, and you know how you get that. Light don't care. How is light ever going to get to the problem if you won't take it there? How are you ever going to get rid of the mildew if you don't want to touch the smelly clothes? You got to pick them up and deal with them. You and me are the priests in this faith. Therefore, confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective, James says, the brother of John. That's at 5:16 if you're looking for it. By golly, it's up there too. One of the biggest tools of Satan is shame. I cannot possibly tell so-and-so that I'm doing that. And I'm telling you, as long as you don't tell them, you're going to keep doing that. That's just the truth. If I'm spending time committing a sin and I don't tell my wife that I'm doing it, well, then I can just keep doing it. And Satan will convince me that I need it to move forward. You're my wife? Are you kidding me? Didn't you mean like my buddy? Couldn't I do that? Let's do that. I'll just tell Tom. That'll be good. I'll just tell Tom. Because Tom loves me and he's my buddy and he would never tell my wife. Tom should say, dude, we need to talk to your wife. Now, it may be 3-4 weeks before we can get there because we got to come up with a way and put away all the weapons and lock them. But as a friend, your job is to expose it to the light. If you're helping to keep it in the dark, you are not part of the team. You're doing them no favor. If you come to me and you tell me, I will talk to you about anything. Now you're going, well, sure, then you tell my wife. No, I'll tell your husband too. If you come to me with a problem, we're going to say two things. It'll stay between us unless you're going to hurt someone or hurt yourself, at which point we're going to go to a professional. You need to know where you stop and they start. If they're married, they are one flesh. And that is as much that other partners need to know as it is of that person. That was English, I'm sure. So then we get to this part, and that may be related to what I just said. What if it won't go away? What if you can't break out of this? What's step 4? Burn it. So like you don't mean like burn it, right? It's like burn it? You mean burn it? Well, here's the thing. Yeah. That's what I mean. What happens to mildew if we just leave it go, if it keeps growing? It gets worse. It keeps growing. It's going to consume the entire thing at some point and destroy it. How many of you picked up something that sat in the corner? I'm a hunter, and so I have a lot of clothes that I don't use for 6 months, and they sit somewhere, And I also am a lazy hunter. On the last day of hunting, I have a tendency to take it off and throw it somewhere. And then I come back the next year and go, I was going to clean that. And you go to pick it up and there's some pieces that maybe have been mildewed. What happens when you go pick up that mildewed, very old piece? It splits, it just falls apart. At some point, you're just going to split and fall apart if you don't kill this right now. All right? Leviticus 13:55. After the article has been washed, and the priest is to examine it again, and if the mold has not changed its appearance, even though it has not spread, it is unclean. Burn it, no matter which side of the fabric has been soiled. But what if it's my favorite Peyton Manning jersey? There's no clause for that, brother. I'm sorry, you're going to have to burn that. What if it's my Andrew Luck jersey? You know, the same applies. You know, Walter Payton. Sorry, dude. It's got to go. Careful, Mike says. But what if it's my bottle of pills that I have to get through the day? What if it's my drink and I got to have it? Okay? What if it's the only thing that makes me feel whole? Has anybody in here been addicted to something? Okay. Has anybody been in a toxic love relationship with somebody? It was the only thing that made you feel whole. And so you kept going back to it, right? No matter how toxic or awful or evil it was the only thing that made you feel whole, to go back to that. And I'm telling you, it's the same as the mildewed cloth. You got to burn it. It's got to be gone. And you and God are the only ones who know the difference between something that can be cleaned and something that's got to be burned. And there are things in your life that have to be burned. Maybe you got to call the cable company and tell them to turn the HBO off. Maybe you got to stop going in the convenience store when you get gas because you can't get out of there without getting some of whatever that is. Maybe you got to stop going to BW3s and watching the fight that they have on there with your buddies because you can't walk out of there without getting a drink and you can't have one. Is this getting more practical to you? Are you understanding what I'm saying? When I say burn it, I mean remove it, make it gone, take it away. You cannot be exposed to it. You can't have a little bit of it. You can't just have a taste. You can't just deal with a little. Okay? You guys know me. He talks about Oreos. I'm going to talk about tobacco. I can't have a little. I can't have a cigar because somebody had a baby. I can't have one. It's not going to work for me. I'm going to have another one tomorrow, and then I'm going to have a chew on the way to work, and then I'm going to have one on the way to work and the way home, and then I'm going to have one at lunch, and then I'm going to be having a can a day. I know me. I got to burn it. Gone. I can't sit in the room with you while you enjoy your cigar because she had a baby. No. Okay. You know you. You can't have a drink. Not one. Not a little kind of sorta. While we were celebrating. You'll be celebrating. Yeah, you'll be celebrating in a few months. All right? You know you. And you know what's going on. Jesus puts it like this. He says, if your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and then throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than your whole body to be thrown into hell. You know, people like to sugarcoat that and they say, well, what he's really saying is, no, what he's really saying is if you can't live without sin because of that thing, you need to stop it. Not kind of, sort of. You need to burn it. Now, I don't want you to go in the parking lot and pluck your eye out. That is not my fault. But I'm only kind of kidding. I don't want you to hurt yourself for this. But there are ways to remove things from your life that don't involve plucking your eye out. If you can't be in a car alone with a female on a date without hurting her or pushing her to do something she doesn't want to do, I'm looking at a section of the room, then you need to not do that. All right? It was so corny. We had this thing by Pat Boone when I was in youth group as a kid. Oh, so corny. He talked about how to have a date. And what he talked about was when you went on the date, you needed to have a plan. You pick her up, you're going from there to get dinner. When you leave dinner, you're going from there to the bowling alley. You were battling 3 games, and you get to the game, you're going from the bowling alley to her house. And her parents were to know what your plans were. You need a flight plan. This is what I'm doing, sir, with your daughter tonight. Say the dads. Okay, now here's one. How many dads will say amen to that? All the ones who have daughters. Okay, dads, how many of you would have followed that? One. Good, Mike. Here's the thing. You wanted to be in the dark with her. Leave it in the light. Bring it to the light. Have a plan for you and for her. Now, I'm talking about something that the teenagers can relate to because they go on dates, but there's some single grown-ups in this room. And you think because you used to be married and now you're not, and you used to do some things that you don't get to do so much anymore, and you're both grown-ups, that maybe it'd be okay. Well, I'm going to suggest to you probably going to their house is not a good idea, even for dinner or to see their etchings. Because you do know. You know. How awesome if 2 grown-ups who started dating as adults can say that they put their chastity back in the box that God is in charge of, and they landed on their wedding night for the first time, reopening that awesome gift that God gave us. Okay? This isn't just about the awful, yucky, funky things that we think about that, well, he likes porn and he's a drinker. No, this is about day-to-day real life. If you can't do it, cut it out and burn it. Don't put yourself in that spot. And that's what Jesus literally meant. Here's the thing. I hung out my laundry for you guys. I regularly do when I come up here and talk. In fact, I would argue for pastors' wives. This is the horrifying moment when he says, well, I used to do blah. I would argue that you guys need to do that with each other. Please expose things to the light. Especially those awful things that you don't think you can talk about. Expose them to the light. I have sat and thought about things as we've matured as Christians, I and my wife, that I could not possibly tell her. There is no way on earth I could tell her that, because we would be divorced that afternoon. There's no way, Lord, I am not talking about that. We're fine. She doesn't need to know that. I'm a Christian now. I'm a good man, and I've been through these things. Jesus says everything that was done in the darkness will be brought to the light. And I am guaranteeing you, you younger people who don't know this, that thing you did, it's coming. It's coming out. You may not think it's coming out, but it's coming out. It'll wait. Justice is slow. It's coming. And when you're all fat and 40 and comfortable, here it comes. Because you're fat and comfortable. And the Lord says, hey, by the way, you're not all that in a bag of chips. You need to wake up and smell the junk that you did and the stuff that's still in your head. And we're going to deal with it like this. Everything that was done in the darkness will be brought to the light. Option, you do it, or he'll do it. Which one do you think lands better? If I'm riding down the street on the bus and I open the door and throw you out in a neighborhood, or if you go, hey, this is my stop. So stop pretending. Stop pretending. I'm not asking you to go to the car and tell him that thing you did. I'm saying start making a game plan for being honest with each other and ask the Lord, how are we going to deal with this? Ask the Lord how we're going to deal with this. He'll present you a plan. He'll help you get there. Just stop pretending. Expose it to the priest. And there's a room full of them. Clean it. He'll do the job. He's good at it. Problem is, he's going to look at other stuff and want to clean it too. He's like that. Separate it. If you can't hang out with your friends and not do that thing, then you better just separate it for a while. But if you separate it and you still can't not do that thing, burn it. Burn it. And there's another one of those check boxes. You can burn it, or he'll burn it. When he burns it, it's going to be for eternity. And you might think I'm one of those nice, touchy-feely pastors that don't want to talk about hell. But hell is a very real place with very real people who stayed in the darkness. And they will be in a whole other kind of light for eternity. Now, if it's 15 minutes, I don't want to be there. But he's going to burn it. Or you can burn it with his help.